Hello and welcome to this short video where I will be exploring some ideas and concepts that underpin successful influencing and negotiating. So I guess the best place to start is about looking at yourself. And as I say here on this slide, know thyself. So when we are negotiating or influencing with people, there is a whole range of emotions that come into play. So I guess the starting point is, do you know how your emotions impact your ability to negotiate and to influence others? So what thinking patterns are you aware of about the strength of your argument, about the person that you are negotiating with or trying to influence? What really motivates you and drives you forward? And what are your needs and what are your wants? So your wants may be something that you desire, whereas your needs are the things that you really need to happen. These are the things that I guess are maybe unnegotiable. How aware are you of your impact on other people? How do you come across? How do people perceive you? And how do you show integrity and honesty? In previous sessions we've talked about trust and the trustworthy equation by Charles Green. And that really comes into place in terms of negotiating. How credible are you? How reliable are you? Do you show a certain degree of intimacy? And do people perceive you of having low self-orientation? So just think a little bit about these questions. How well do you know yourself? So let's have a look at this in a little bit more detail. In the red circle in the middle, it talks about motivation. So are you a glass half full or a glass half empty person? How confident are you about getting a positive outcome from your negotiations or your influencing? What drives you? What motivates you? How aware are you of your needs and wants? Remember, the needs are the things that are the core of the need to negotiate. What are the things that are non-negotiable? And what are the wants, the desires, the cherry on the cake, as it were? Also, how self-aware are you? How do you react in certain situations? What are the buttons that people can press that evoke a certain reaction from you? There may be things that people say or how people act that start to get you to react in a bit of a negative way or start to make those negative thoughts pop into your mind. What are those buttons? It also talks about BATNA. Now, BATNA stands for the best alternative to a negotiated agreement. So if your negotiations and influencing doesn't work, what's the next best thing? Now, a few moments ago I talked about which buttons people can press to evoke a reaction. We have a choice as individuals. We can separate our emotions from our behaviour. So if people have pressed one of those buttons, what emotions are you aware of? Can you name them? Take a deep breath, and can you separate those emotions or those moods from your behaviour? Remember, you do have a choice. In the green circle, we talk about empathy. If you are going to influence or negotiate, you've got to think of things from the other person's point of view. What are their needs and wants? How do you think they will react to your proposals? How will you know? How will you know what kind of reactions you're going to get? How well do you actively listen? And that's not just listening to what's being said, but really trying to delve into the meaning of what's being said. And finally, the social skills. How do you build rapport? How do you show your humanity? How do you show your integrity? These are the things that are really key if we are going to negotiate. So let's have a look at some of the key behaviours of skilled negotiators. So firstly, they ask more questions. The questions are there to help you find out about what the other party needs or wants. This will allow you to adapt your proposals so they've got more of a chance of being accepted. So ask questions that start to really identify the other party's needs or wants. Skilled negotiators also test and summarize. Negotiating and influencing can be a little bit messy, and summarizing regularly helps provide clarity and promotes understanding. It makes sure that both parties are seeing things from the same perspective. Also, through testing and summarizing, you can actually identify small agreements that can be built upon, things that both parties are starting to gravitate towards. So to counteract that messiness of negotiations and influencing activity, constantly test and summarize. Successful negotiators also signpost their behaviour. To navigate a way through this messiness, they recognise that many questions and suggestions can be lost in the noise of negotiation. So by signposting your behaviour, can I ask a question or can I propose something? You're creating that bit of space for you to ask that question or make that proposal. And again, that can help create that focus. Also with negotiations, there can be emotions wrapped up in what you're talking about. And that really means you've got to be careful about the language that you use. So try to avoid words that could seem to be judgmental. So for example, I'm going to make you a fair offer. Fair to whom? Fair to them? Fair to you? Or this is a generous offer, or this is a generous action. Generous to who? It's just an offer, it's just an action. The words fair and generous are judgmental words that can be viewed negatively. And how many times do we say, oh, with respect? Now, does that mean that we've been unrespectful so far? We just need to think about how those words land. And then there's about having adult-to-adult conversations. Now, I'm not going to delve into the depth of transactional analysis. I might cover that in another little video. But how do your emotions affect the way that you communicate? Do you move to parent-child territory where you're talking down to somebody because you don't think their offer or their actions are really what you're looking for? It's very easy in negotiations to get hooked up in that emotion, where we move from adult-to-adult conversations to parent-child conversations. And that comes across in our tone of voice and our body language. So be aware of your own emotional reactions. Take that deep breath if you feel that you are moving into that territory where the hairs on the back of your neck stand up and you just want to have that kind of parent-child conversation. Take a deep breath and move back into that adult conversation space. The third area where we're looking at the key behaviours of skilled negotiators is, firstly, they give fewer counter proposals. So they question and consider deeply a proposal that they may have received from another party. They go for considered quality. So before responding with a counter proposal, there's a period of deep reflection to say, okay, how does that meet my needs and wants? What is the quality that may be wrapped up in that kind of proposal? And also, they are very aware of the arguments that they're putting forward. They stick to one strong argument, which is the golden thread that runs through those negotiations. Offering weaker supportive arguments really starts to weaken the whole position, because these are things that can be broken down. They can be chipped away, and that ultimately diminishes your position. But sticking to that one strong argument that you're putting a lot of energy and thought behind can really help to give you a good platform from which you can negotiate. So next, let's just go into negotiations in a little bit more depth. And we're going to cover three areas: preparation, bargaining, and the final agreement. And during this section, we're going to look at what things you need to prepare and the type of thinking that is useful. We'll think about how you move into that kind of bargaining space. and also how you need to wrap up that kind of agreement. So, firstly, let's talk about preparation. Now, when you're looking at preparation, there are three thinking patterns that are crucial here: analytical thinking, critical thinking, and creative thinking. And you may have a preference for one or the other. So as you're listening to this part of the presentation, just think about these thinking styles and which ones do you navigate towards. So firstly, let's talk about analytical thinking. Now, when you're going to influence or negotiate, the first thing you need to do is to give yourself time to prepare. And this analytical thinking is really about thinking deeply about what is it that I actually need and what is it that I actually want, and are these separate things? Also, when do I need it or when do I want it? Is it time sensitive? And then spending a bit of time delving into the heart of why you are needing to negotiate and influence. What has led you to this point in time when you need to have that conversation? So analytical thinking means that you need to identify the issue. What's at the heart of it? It's also about creating a hypothesis. What would that positive outcome look like? If you were to influence upwards or negotiate and you were to get what you want, what would the future look like? But also the analytical thinking is about what qualitative and quantitative data do you have to support your hypothesis. If you've created that hypothesis about what the future looks like, what are the facts, figures, what's the data that underpins that? Now, there's a number of things you can use to analyse that data. The SWOT analysis, for example: strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, threats. The fishbone diagram, where you're looking at what is the problem that I'm trying to sort here and what are the causal factors. It could be a force field analysis, where we're looking at what are the driving forces and what are the restraining forces. And these are the things that we can talk about in a bit more depth when we meet online to talk about this particular module. Once you've identified the issue, created that hypothesis, looked at the data, analysed the data, has that possible solution become any clearer? Are you more aware of what you are wanting to achieve? So let's have a little look at critical thinking. So if you've analysed where you are, if you analyse where you want to be, if you know what the positive outcomes of that negotiating and influence is going to be, is that based on true fact? Or have you made any false assumptions? So critically think about what facts you've got that back up the need to negotiate. The other thing as well is look out for singular solutions to complex problems. If you're negotiating and influencing in one area, it might not solve the total challenge. There may be other things in play. You may be just negotiating one part of the system where other parts of the system need equal attention. So look out for singular solutions to complex problems. Do they exist? And then there's a saying, there's lies, damn lies, and statistics. Beware of the limitation of statistics. What are those statistics telling you? There may not be a causal link. And then think about yourself. We've already touched on being self-aware. Is your thinking affected by bias? And that could be bias about your thoughts and feelings about the situation, your thoughts and feelings about the person that you're negotiating with. And also, is there any false logic driving the need to negotiate? So let's have a little look at creative thinking. And I just want to mention 4 ways to think creatively: front to back thinking, back to front thinking, bottom up, and bigger picture. So front to back thinking is thinking about where you are now, where you want to be, what's the greatest outcome you can get from this negotiation or influencing exercise, and then following the issue from the beginning to the end. What needs to happen sequentially? But sometimes it's worthwhile starting at the end and working backwards. So if you have got a clear picture about where you want to be, and you've got that clear vision, what needs to be achieved to get to that particular point? So work backwards and then see how you can achieve that. There's also bottom up, and that's about flipping the question. So if you are thinking about what can we do to increase our student numbers, for example, flip the question. The question could be, what is preventing more students from applying to our programs? It's just about looking at that particular issue from a different perspective. And by doing that, sometimes it opens up different opportunities and different solutions may come to mind. And also think about the bigger picture. When we are negotiating, sometimes we're focusing on just one area. And if we stand back and elicit the views from others, what are they thinking? How does this fit into the wider system? What is the bigger picture that's coming to mind? Now, another key area in preparation is something I've mentioned already, and this is the BATNA, the best alternative to a negotiated agreement or a negotiated outcome. Not all influencing and negotiating activities lead to success. So what is the best alternative? What is the thing that you can fall back on? And again, you need to think about your MFP, which is your most favoured position. So what would 100% success look like? What are the things that will get you whooping with joy and saying, yes, we've had a really positive outcome? But also, what is your fallback position? What is the least you will accept? So if you're thinking about your most favoured position and your fallback position and the best alternative to a negotiated agreement, what about the other party? What could be their MFP and their FBP? Because by thinking of those things, you can start to identify where that settlement area may be. So let's have a look at the negotiating side. And there are a number of areas that we need to concentrate on. First of all, the objectives. Why are you negotiating? Why are you having to influence others? What do you want? And what is it that you don't want? So think about those objectives. Also think about that from the other party's point of view, because that will help you empathize with their position. And through empathy, sometimes you can find common ground. Think about how you're going to put it across. What's your argument? How can you put your argument across in a way that's understood? And part of that is about making them party to your ideas. Paint a picture, a rich, vivid picture about what the benefits are of your ideas. So the benefits are the things that will make life easier for you, but also easier for them. So selling the benefits is very much about identifying the features of your solution, your proposal, but then creating benefits for each of those features. And then finally, follow up with action. Who does what and when? Never leave a negotiating or influencing situation without a clear action about what's going to happen next. So let's have a little look about the communication skills that underpins successful influencing and negotiating. So first of all, there's the rapport building. We trust people if we see them as being like ourselves. Now that rapport is built upon how we perceive the other people's tone of voice. So what impact is your tone of voice having on other people? Also the non-verbal communication. So we talk about congruency. So is the non-verbal communication, the body language, matching the words that you're saying? Also think about micro gestures. There are things that we do that we may not necessarily be totally aware of. So do we raise an eyebrow? Do we frown? Is there that fleeting glance that passes across our face? just be aware of how these can actually affect the rapport building part of negotiations. Mirroring is about mirroring the body language and the style of the person that we're talking to. Remember, we build rapport easily if people see ourselves as being trustworthy, and that is about people seeing us as being like them. And also think about the importance of eye contact. Part of this building rapport is also about empathy. Now, we've talked about putting yourself in the shoes of the other party. What matters to the other party? What are their needs and wants? What's their mindset and what is yours? And just be aware of any of those biases that may affect your behaviour. There's also this issue about perspective. Sometimes we can all look at the same thing and see it completely differently. So how do you see things and how do they see things? And is it worthwhile exploring the different perspectives that may be in play? What drives you and what drives them? Can you uncover some of the deep motivators that is driving their behaviour? And also, when we're thinking about negotiating and influencing, there's this whole area of concessions. The things that we may be able to give away, the little gifts that we can give during the process. So what can you offer and what do you think they can offer? But part of the concessions is also identifying the things that you will find difficult to give away and what they will find difficult to give away. And also, what are the perceived benefits of those concessions? If you're going to make a concession, it's going to be beneficial. It's going to be of some value to the other party. So think about the kind of concessions. Now, sometimes when we're negotiating, we start off with a big long preamble, and people have got to cut their way through it to find out really what it is we're trying to say. So if you are going to influence or negotiate, be prepared. Be concise and keep it simple. Start off with a very clear opening statement about what good looks like and why you're wanting to have this conversation. And it's also about painting this clear and engaging picture. A picture that people can see themselves as being part of. And also it's about being authentic. It's about being true, and it's about showing your integrity. Now, if you've done your preparation and you are wanting to influence upwards or negotiate with another outside organisation, you will know what your needs and wants are. You will know what success looks like to you. So make them party to your ideas. So what could be different? What will the benefits be and to whom? What do you want and why do you want them? Or what don't you want and why? Again, what's the benefits of that to you and to the other party? And also think about chunking. Now, it sounds a bit strange to talk about chunking, but chunking up is how will this affect the bigger picture? If you do this now, what's the outcomes going to be in the future? How it's going to affect the bigger picture? Or chunk down. What are the specific effects going to be in certain specific areas? So make people party to your ideas. It's about openness and about honesty. Now, part of negotiating and influencing is about trading. What will you give? What do you require? And it's about give and take. So the first thing to talk about is reciprocity. Give and take. The best way to get a concession is to give one. Also, give up concessions after careful consideration. Your concessions will have value. And really, to emphasize that value, you need to give that concession away in a thoughtful manner. So really carefully consider what it is you're giving away. So as we said, the concession should have a perceived value to the other party. Otherwise, why should they accept it? And never give a concession without asking for one back. Now, the value of what you receive may be different to the value of the concession that you give, and that's fine. But never give a concession without asking for one back. It is about give and take. And don't offer any counter concessions or proposals immediately. Question their proposal. What is the motivation behind them giving you that concession? Carefully think about it and consider what your next step is going to be and what you could give in return. Now, I've already mentioned chunking, but let me just spend a little bit more time just talking about chunking up and the importance of finding common ground in any kind of influencing and negotiating activity. If you can chunk up, in other words, you can identify the bigger picture from both parties' perspectives, you may see something that is reflected in that bigger picture that meets the needs and wants of both parties. So chunking up is about taking that step back and looking at it from a wider perspective. So if you think about the picture, which is the picture of a maze, imagine we've got two people stuck in that maze. If we could send a drone up and look at the maze from a higher perspective, we might be able to navigate a way through that meets the needs of both parties. So sometimes when we're negotiating about a specific issue or a specific challenge. But by stepping back and looking at it from a bigger perspective, sometimes we can actually identify a different way forward. So when we are talking about negotiating, there are two different types that are often talked about, and that is positional versus principled negotiations. So positional is about identifying what your position is and digging in, and then with positional negotiations is about bartering, haggling, making concessions, and sometimes the challenge there is that you're at polar opposites. Yeah, positional is I want X, you want B, and you end up with some kind of concession, which is maybe 50-50 or 70-30. And I think when you're looking at positional negotiations, the values tend to be, I've got to get the best deal for my school or my department. I don't want to concede, and it leads to what I call hard and soft behaviours. Yeah, it's about pushing and pulling. Now, principled negotiation is slightly different. And this is about understanding the principles behind the other side's positions. Yes, they will be in a position. However, what has led them to taking that position? And if we can look at some kind of mutual understanding, is understanding why they are where they are, and they can understand why you are where you are, it helps us to identify some needs of both parties. And the values that underpin this kind of principled bargaining or principled negotiations is that we are working together to find a solution that meets the needs of both parties. It allows space for creativity. It allows space to find common ground. It allows space to activate that kind of chunking up activity we've just spoken about. So if we have a look at this particular diagram, PIN, positions, interests, needs and fears. If you can see the top triangle in both of those pyramids, that really starts to illustrate some kind of positional bargaining. I'm at one side, you're at the other side, and sometimes it can be very difficult to identify what's underpinning that because we have the conversation from a positional perspective. However, if we start to identify what are the interests that's leading to those positions and what are the needs that have led to those interests, we can start to identify areas of common ground. So the red triangle there is the area that is of real benefit, and that's where we need to focus the conversations. So talking about positions is not going to lead us there. But if we can sort of delve beneath the conversation and talk about interests and needs, we may be able to find a solution that meets the interests and needs of both parties. So what happens in positional bargaining is that egos get entangled. It's about winning and losing. We attack the positions and we dig our own positions in deeper, and we become a little bit more intransigent. We focus on this kind of singularity of negotiations. It's more for me and less for you, or more for you and less for me. I want to win at all costs, and our behaviour tends to be coercive kind of behaviour because we are guarding those kind of positions, and that can be a bit of a challenge. Another challenge with positional bargaining is the type of behaviours that we see. We tend to see hard or soft behaviours. So the hard behaviours see the other party as an adversary, making demands. They are wanting something that we don't want. They make threats. It's hard to make concessions. They won't budge. Or the soft kind of behaviours is where we see them as a friend. We yield to threats. We make concessions. We may not have the same level of power within those kind of negotiations. So what we want to move to is more of a principled negotiator in the way that we are facing those kind of negotiations. So a better approach may be to move to be a more principled negotiator. And it's about seeking a wise outcome that meets the needs and wants of both parties. If we are going to be principled negotiators, we see all parties involved as problem solvers. They've all got an interest in solving that problem for maximum benefit. It's not making threats or yielding to threats, but thinking about principles. What are the interests and needs, and how can we put things forward that speak to those interests and needs? And being a principled negotiator means believing in creativity, seeking a way that meets all parties' needs. You might want A, I might want B, but can we find C which meets the needs and wants of both parties? And it's about managing that relationship in a positive way. So let's start to summarise before we look at some of the skills and behaviours that underpin successful influencing and negotiating. So let's have a look at the negotiation journey. We've talked about preparation and the different types of thinking. We've talked about identifying your BATNA, best alternative to a negotiated agreement. We've talked about your objectives and also putting yourself in their shoes and thinking about their objectives. We've talked about having an opening statement which is clear and precise and painting a picture. Think about how you're going to present your case. Listen to their case, active listening, listening to the message and the sentiment behind what they're saying. Ask questions. Great negotiators ask more questions. Think about what you could trade, what your concessions could be, and what could they trade. Think about if you will, we will. Think about those kind of concessions and bargaining. What are the features and benefits of those concessions? Every concession needs to have a benefit, and it needs to answer the WIIFM question. What's in it for me? And then think about the agreement. Summarise regularly, because it allows people to see where they are in the negotiating process. Document what has been agreed, who's going to do what and when are you going to review. So the kind of key questions that you need to be thinking about is, my negotiations are about, the purpose of my influencing is because, what's led you to that particular position? What are your objectives? How are you going to negotiate? What's your BATNAs, your most favourite position, your fallback position? What is it that you really want to achieve? What are you willing and unwilling to trade? What are those concessions? What are the things that you won't give away without a fight or without difficulty? What do you know about the other party, about what they want and need? It's all about doing your homework. So let's finish by looking at some of the key negotiating skills. I guess there are 4 powerful concepts. Firstly, separate the people from the problem or the issue that you are negotiating about. Okay, we've talked about bias, we've talked about the buttons that people can press, but you are dealing with a situation, a challenge. Yes, people are part of that, but can you separate the people from that problem or challenge? And if you can, you may see a different perspective. Focus on interests and not positions. Now, we've covered this quite a bit. Okay, what are their interests? What are their needs? What is underpinning those positions? And can you create an arena where you can look at options where both parties gain something? And also make sure that throughout the negotiations you are insisting on objective criteria. So the kind of skills that we need to be So when we look at influencing and negotiating, there are 2 main categories of skills that are involved. One is push skills and the other is pull skills. Push skills is about asserting your outcomes, stating what you need, pushing those out into the arena. Pull skills is about building relationships, pulling people towards you, listening and really listening to what the other party wants. But both those push and pull skills are underpinned by skills that help to draw people towards you. So let's have a look at that in a little bit more detail. Think of it as a wheel if you want. So let's have a look at the kind of push skills that we're talking about here. So the idea of push skills is about asserting outcomes. What is it that you want? And there are skills which is about being clear about your wants and consequences. What is it that you want? What is it that you need? But making sure that that is a clear statement, not wrapped in waffly words. It's also about giving feedback. We've talked about concessions and considering concessions carefully, but it's about giving feedback on those concessions, asserting an outcome, thinking about that concession that has been offered to you, what will work and what won't work, before giving that counter concession. And it's also about suggesting and proposing ideas, putting things out there in the arena for people to consider, but creating a very clear picture of the benefits that those proposals and ideas will realise. So the push styles are you're pushing things out into the open. The pull styles is about relationship building. And successful influencing and negotiating is about recognising the power of that relationship. So that involves active listening and questioning. So listening to what's been said by the other party and also what's not been said. It's about thinking about not just the words, but the music. And what I mean by that is thinking about what is the mood music behind what's been said. Think about the body language. Think about how they are putting forward their ideas. It's also about being open. There is this idea about authenticity, about self-disclosure, about being intimate. If you remember the trust equation, intimacy was part of that trust equation. And being open and a bit of self-disclosure helps people build that relationship. You come across as being somebody who cares about the outcomes from both parties' perspectives. And also think about how you can offer positive support to some of their ideas that are being put forward. Rather than yes but, yes and. Now yes but is the kind of statement that says, yes, I've listened to you, but and then there's going to be a negative statement. Yes and builds on that positive support. And we could do this and we could do that. It allows you to build on ideas and suggestions that are put forward. But all these are underpinned by behaviours that draw people towards you. And the things that are important in this area is about finding common ground and envisioning. We've talked about chunking up, about looking at things from a different perspective. If we can identify the needs and wants of both parties, we might find some of those resonate with our needs and wants. And if we can find that common ground and we can envision a future where we all get what we need, we start to draw people towards us. And then it's about having a positive impact, selling the features and benefits of what you are proposing. But not just benefits from your perspective, but benefits from the other people's perspective as well. What are they going to get out of it? So when we're thinking about influencing, we're thinking about pull styles, we're thinking about push styles, and drawing towards. Just spend a little bit of time considering the behaviours in that particular wheel. And which ones can you say, yes, I really do display those behaviours, and which ones do you need to think about developing in a little more depth. So thank you for listening. I hope you found that useful. We will explore some of these concepts and ideas when we meet together online, and we'll look at a little bit more about some of the thinking styles and some of the tools and techniques. Thank you for listening.